We've got very little time, Neil, so
Yep.
we'll
Yep.
jump in first with a rather obvious question, but I think a necessary one. With It Couldn't Happen Here, how did that come about? How did you get to work with Jack Bond?
Well, it was 1987. We were planning our album, actually, and in those days, people thought the video album was a new format. I think the Eurythmics had made one, and we were planning to do a video album with the director Zbigniew Brzezinski, who had done the famous Art of Noise video, and for us, he did the second version of Opportunities. And then he couldn't do it. I don't know, something happened. Maybe he made a film, in fact. And
did it not make a piece about the Odessa Steps as well at some point?
Oh, but
or am I thinking of another director?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then they had this idea of this director called Jack Bond. Jack, we knew because he'd done the South Bank show. He'd done 2 or 3 films, and he'd just done one about Roald Dahl, and Ian McKellen, who was then in the video Jack did for Hot, Ian McKellen was in it, and we liked the fact that he had this format where he placed Roald Dahl in the landscape and with the characters of his books. And so the idea came up that we would be placed in the landscape of our songs. And we met Jack and we liked him. This point was going to be an hour-long film, by the way. And we had several dinners with Jack Bond where we talked about our lives. And then he produced this script. And I don't know, I saw it in a funny kind of way. We thought it was sort of nothing to do with us, really. I don't know if that's the script. I mean, who are we, to say anything about it? So we sort of said yes, and had all the right songs in. And then, it sort of, the album actually came out in September of 1987, and then I think we started filming it later that month or the beginning of October. I remember we took a break because we had to do, I don't remember when we did the London Palladium show, sent out the London Palladium. That was in the middle of filming because Barbara Windsor was very cross we wouldn't go on the revolving stage at the end. She told us off. But probably most people don't understand that reference, but and then after about a week or so, Jack came up to us and said, you've had 4 number ones, someone wants to release this at the cinema. We've got to shoot another half an hour. And we were like, oh, okay. He said, so we're going to write another half an hour, and we're just going to shoot it, okay? And we said, yeah, okay, fine. I don't know, we didn't really think it was anything to do with us, really. We were just in it, and we did this, and filming it was a lot of fun. We were with Gareth Hunt, Barbara Windsor, and Joss Ackland. We spent a lot of time in the caravan, the Winnebago, with Joss Ackland and Barbara Windsor. Actors always have these amazing stories, and that was a lot of fun. We did a week of night shoots in Clacton.
Nigel Farage's constituency. And
well,
the kiosk man keeps complaining about politicians.
He does? No.
What's been called an unheard voice recently, but
no.
He was heard 30-odd years ago.
He was. The Seaside thing was because Chris is from Blackpool. There are a lot of autobiographical things. The schoolboys with the Catholic priest, that's Neil's school at St. Cuthbert's, school days at St. Cuthbert's. The Seaside is Chris. The mothers. We both had, Chris's mother's still alive, my mother isn't, and it was very strong mothers, and they sort of both in Barbara Windsor. So there's a lot of autobiographical things. It's interesting though, Clacton, I once, not that long ago, looked up the Wikipedia entry of Clacton, only because I think we were going to go there or something. And to my astonishment, it's a very short Wikipedia entry, but about a third of it was about the Pet Shop Boys film played there. But unfortunately,
you think Farage read that and thought, that's my... that's where I'm gonna
Unfortunately,
be?
I haven't looked at it since, but I imagine there's a bit about Nigel Farage. So they've had the Pet Shop Boys and Nigel Farage. But I think, I know you have a sort of theory that it's... in the 90s, people used to say it was the first Britpop movie because the aesthetic of the film, the British seaside, the sort of bright colours, seemed to prefigure a Blur video, say, in the Britpop period. It also, I was watching last night, by coincidence, a documentary about Martin Parr, the photographer who actually made a video with.
Yeah.
There's a certain Martin Parrishness about some of it. And I think Jack Bond thought that we had this strong interest in this sort of England of our childhood and the seaside. And Chris lived at the seaside, as I always said. And when we, growing up in Newcastle, were always at Whitley Bay or Tynemouth and stuff like that. And it was a sort of there were certainly strong memories of that. But also there's something about the seaside. We were always fascinated by the melancholy of the seaside. I mean, let's face it, Morrissey wrote the ultimate song several years after. It couldn't happen yet, but Every Day It's Like Sunday. These declining seaside towns that only recently have started to perk up a bit, like some of Margate has and Winstable and what have you. But there's something about that's sort of a wistful quality that probably even now still fascinates us, actually.
Yes.
And we've quite often done photo shoots and stuff, even since then, at the seaside. So that was a very strong idea behind the film, that it was presenting an idea of people in the 80s were still obsessed by Britain in decline, which was an issue since the 50s, probably, wasn't it? And under Thatcher, in theory, it was sort of turning around. On our album actually was received as being an album about Thatcherism, which these things are often done subconsciously. I remember our mutual friend John Savage reviewing the album in the Observer or something, and he said something like that, and I thought, I hadn't really thought of it like that. But the song King's Cross, which is a very strong scene in the film, is completely about Thatcherism, the people left behind. And so it is a sort of presentation of a certain kind of Britishness and a Britishness in decline.
Yes, but I think one interesting, because in some ways that is now almost a very well-rehearsed
It
subject.
is. It's almost a cliche now.
It's like kind of crap towns and seaside towns and all that kind of thing. But what I found interesting about, I saw it for the first time, 5 or 6 years ago, when there was a limited release, but sort of truncated by COVID. And it struck me how much it addressed issues which, as you're describing, have become much more kind of current since. But you got stuck in there very early on. And when I saw it, I thought it's a sort of it's a post-Brexit film, but it's made before Brexit.
Well, it sort of is that, yeah. I think it's because, of course, a lot of people thought this at the time. 1987 is when we shot this. Is almost the height of Mrs. Thatcher. It's when all privatisation is coming in, and the council houses being sold and all the rest of it. And there was a sort of change in, I remember we used to talk about this with Derek Jarman, actually. There was a change coming in, and some of it you thought was sort of inevitable. But at the same time, you always thought it wasn't fair. And that's what King's Cross is about, the song King's Cross is about, that it's not sort of fair. And there's something, I don't know if that goes into the film, but Jack Bond's talked us through all of these things and written his script on the basis of that.
Yeah, well, I think things like that, because you could think of that as a primitive sense of justice, and I think it runs through the film. It's got one thing I really liked about the film, and I've now seen it 3 or 4 times. It has although it has this fantastic surface, there's subterranean things going on at the same time. I mean, with that, I'm sure you know that from when you make certain kinds of music, you're never sure where that comes from or how conscious it is.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
It's sort of in there.
But you were aware shooting the film that Jack Bond had a sort of agenda that we didn't really understand. The big speech about time.
Yes, yeah.
Now, you explained that to me on the phone 2 days ago.
Well, it was more because...
Or what do you think he got it? Where do you think he got it from?
Well, as some of the audience, I'm sure, know, Jack made a film with Jane Arden called Anti-Clock. And it's fair to say, amongst other things, the film is obsessed by the idea of time. And I think Jack continues his exploration, as it were, in this film. But it's sort of mixed up with something almost to me like Lewis Carroll, because it's sort of teacups and language, and I'm there because I'm here, or whatever the character says. I think in Anti-Clock, somebody says to the main character who's contemplating suicide, "What is it that you really want?" And he says, "I want now." Again, playing with language and time, and I think it's fair to say it's something that Jack was interested in. I never talked to him about that theme in his work, but it's very strongly there.
Yes, I mean, I think when I said Chris Sanchez sort of accepted the script, it's because I think we thought Jack knew what he was doing. He was making a film that he wanted to make, and who are we to get in the way of it? And maybe it would all make sense at some point. And here, 37 years later, it's sort of starting to make sense.
Yeah. But actually, we are living through now in real time. And we push for time, because that's reality.
Yes.
And we need to move on to talk about Potemkin.
Yes.
Although there's so much we could talk about with it couldn't happen.
I think the
here.
BFI need to show all of Jack Bond's films in a little season, because they're not that many, including It Couldn't Happen Here.
Yeah,
because I would like to see that too, because I've never seen Jack's films actually. Yeah,
well, I think if you were to see it in Anti-Clock is such a different film, but if you saw it in that context, you'd think, the Donald McGill version of Anti-Clock with the Pet Shop Boys. But we should move on to Potemkin.
Yes. Can I just say though that before he died, Jack, we were meant to have an event like this with Jack in 5 years ago, but COVID stopped. But Jack called me up quite often after the Blu-ray came out, and he said, "Neil, I think we've got to do another one." I said, "I've got to do another one with you and Chris." I said, "Really?" And he said, I said, "How about it's Chris and I as children, like the two boys in the film? You could make it around the pre-story of It Couldn't Happen Here." And actually, he quite liked that idea.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen, obviously.
Yeah.
Sorry, but Potemkin.
Yes, because we're going to be watching that, but the score, I think, is really interesting. It's got this incredible pulse, which to me is almost like the collective heartbeat of the people running through the film. That it finds other incredible moments where the pulse is still there, but much more elegiac moments, including the funeral sequences, which, although it's stripped of a lot of religious imagery, is still very much an orthodox funeral, which actually Jack had.
The last time we met was at Jack Bond's funeral. But to both of our surprise, it was Russian Orthodox funeral.
But I wondered with that, and obviously, the film's been scored after the event by people using bits of Shostakovich and other composers. But I wondered, did you approach it with a sort of overarching kind of idea, or was it more, I mean, how did you work on it?
Well, we were asked to do it by the ICA, by Philip Dodd at the ICA, and it was, remember, which is a crucial thing, it was done for a live event. The ICA had been given Trafalgar Square for the day by Ken Livingstone, the Mayor of London, and Philip decided he wanted to show Battleship Potemkin because Trafalgar Square, he said, is the place where protest happens in London. At that point, we just had a lot of protests against the Iraq War. Famously, the poll tax riots happened there, etc., etc. And he told us that before we started. So we were very much scoring something for a live event that needed to have impact. We approached it, though, simply as the Pet Shop Boys writing an electronic music score, which is what he asked us to do. But then we said we wanted to have strings as well. And Pete Gledell, our programmer, we bought a DVD of it. We sat and watched it at my house then in Durham with the sound down because we didn't want to be influenced by the Shostakovich pieces that had been dubbed onto it. And then Pete managed to load the whole film from the DVD into the computer, and we started at the beginning. Chris had already written what is the opening theme. We were trying to write a hit single for the pop art greatest hits compilation. And Chris said, well, I've got this idea. Just wait a second. And he played the opening theme in one take, all the way through, in one take on a string sound. And then we said, oh, great. And then we carried on writing another song. And then I'm a great believer in not wasting pieces of music you've written. I said, oh, well, that'd be great for Battleship Potemkin. And so it became the opening theme. And then we would look at each scene, see what the arc of the scene was. The second scene, where the maggots and the meat, is very long, and I was worried that piece was too repetitive. And then the funeral scene's very lyrical. Then when they're all on the shore, we went back to the original theme because it was Chris did this arrangement, which I always thought sounded like Radiohead in a good way, by the way. And then, of course, you've got the Odessa Steps sequence, which is really famous in film history. And again, we're also bearing in mind what Philip Dodd said about the event. So sometimes I took lyrics like No Time for Tears, I thought was inspired by one of the captions. I think on this version of the film you're going to see, we had different captions on the Tartan video DVD we had. But anyway, and then I was thinking about the Iraq War protests. So in the Odessa Steps sequence, you actually get a speech about the Iraq War, because we're all in Trafalgar Square at this point. But a lot of the words seem to work with the scene anyway, and the music is very, very powerful, if I say so myself. And also, the good thing about doing it digitally, we could sync up sounds. So, when the plate smashes, we smash the plate, and we could sync up the gunshots in the Odessa Steps sequence when the Cossacks arrive. And then, when you go back on the ship, we wanted it to sound industrial. Eisenstein, there's a quote from Eisenstein somewhere where he said he wanted to have the music of machines or something like that. And I always felt pleased we got that in that bit. And then I remember right at the end playing the keyboard, and Chris was asleep actually on the sofa in the classic Chris Lowe way. And Pete Gledell suddenly went, what? And he says, the end. And we'd got to the end. And then we had to go back and edit it and make it all work. But it was an incredible endeavour to put all this music together and to try and keep it interesting. We were determined it would sound sort of electronic and dramatic. And then I read about this album, music by Rammstein, by the composer Torsten Rasch. And I read a rave review of it actually, and I bought the album. It's called Mein Herz brennt. And And I liked it. And I said to Chris, why don't we get this guy to do the orchestral arrangements? Because he's a bit dissonant as well. And there was an email address on the album. And we met this guy, Sven Helbig, who we're working with actually at the moment on something. And we went and met him and Torsten Rasch in Berlin. And Torsten agreed to do it. And that was quite a long process because we said to Torsten, you can do whatever you like. Well, he did whatever he liked. And we said, yeah, but not that. And it was good we had Sven as a mediator, because Sven had produced the Rammstein album. And Torsten was always complaining that our music was too repetitive. And I said, pop music is based on repetition. Anyway, we got there. God, we got there. And then we had the very exciting event. I think you were there, Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, Trafalgar Square was tremendous to be there and see it live. On the other hand, I think it works in a different way when you see it on. I've watched it since on the smaller screen with the great restoration that the BFI have.
This is an
taken
amazing
on.
thing because when we showed it, we were showing a DVD that we bought in Our Price Records or something. In concert, I think, and that's what was shown on the screen at Trafalgar Square. The BFI told us just a few months ago we were sort of aware this was going on. We weren't really focused on it, and we got sent a link, and I said, but this is a totally new version of this. I thought we weren't allowed to have that because we have to sync everything up frame by frame to the music. And they said, no, they've done that. And it really is a revelation. Well, we're doing one at the moment because we are finally recording the Alan Turing piece. Which we did at the Proms, I don't know, at least 10 years ago. I can't remember what year it was. And 10 years ago, it was 2015. And we're revising it a bit. Sven Helbig is producing it with us, which is why I've been talking to him. And the Manchester Camerata are going to play the orchestra. It's going to be a smaller orchestra through choice, because we thought it was a bit over grand at the Proms. So we've sort of revising it. Juliet Stevenson's still going to do the voice. And so that's something we're doing at the moment. We have, our last album, nonetheless, had an orchestra on most of the tracks. We just, with Stuart Price, done 3 purely electronic albums, and so I guess we thought the time was right for an orchestra to come back. But it's one of the, ever since we first did an orchestral session, which was with Trevor Horn for Left Your Own Devices in 1988, we've always loved the combination, particularly of electronics and strings. And of course, remember, Chris is a brass player, he's a trombone player, so he very much likes brass as well. And so it always feels like a natural fit, so much so it's kind of what we would call one of our product ranges. And but it's something we really like doing, and I think what we really like is the richness and depth of the harmony that you get out of having an orchestra. Sometimes I think you can rely on it too much, but it's definitely something that we have a sort of devotion to. Oh, John Saxon was great. In the scene in the car, which of course then became the video of What Was On My Mind, the basis of it, he was great because Chris and I, that's the one scene in the film we have to act. And he was very good in between the shots. He would sort of talk us into the scene, and then they'd sort of start shooting it. And he was really great to work with, and very helpful to work with. And also he's a fun, as I said before, the caravan, him and Barbara Windsor telling all these stories was really great.
And Gareth Hunt.
Gareth Hunt was never in the caravan though. I don't remember. Gareth Hunt was really. The first scene we shot was the beginning of the film. Me on the bicycle. This is in Clacton. And then we shot the scene of the cafe, what's it, the coffee stall thing, and I was chatting to him, and this is a funny thing when you don't normally work with actors, and then they said shoot, and he turned into the character, and he was no longer Gareth Hunt. And now actors are used to that, but I'm not a professional actor.
Well,
and
Neil, one man's shoot is another man's cut. And
there you go.
we're already running a bit late.
Okey-doke. So
but
there we
thanks-
have it. Yes.
Thanks for some fantastic
Thank you.
answers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.